In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an effect that makes it look like any image that you add to your Photoshop document has been torn out of a magazine. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I already have this image in my Photoshop document. You can see my background is like a cork board. So I'm going to turn this image, which is in its own layer, to a smart object by right-clicking and choosing Convert to Smart Object over here in the menu. It might not look like it changed anything, but if you look closely at the icon on the layer, you'll see that there's a little sub icon that shows that it is a smart object. So I'm going to double click on that. And now you can see why I made it a smart object. It allows me to treat this one image as if it's its own document. So I can start editing on this image directly. Next, I'm going to go to my lasso tool, put the lasso tool in my hand, and I'm going to simulate tears as if I have torn this out of a magazine. So as I drag with the lasso tool, I'm going to let my hand kind of wander back and forth as if I'm making a jagged edge. And I'm going to make it uneven. So it doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle or a perfect triangle because it's just trying to simulate that the tear was not perfect. So it shouldn't necessarily be a perfect shape. Okay, so now I have a tear that looks kind of like a quadrilateral, not perfect, a little bit rough. All right, so I only want the part of the image that's on the inside of the selection. To do that, I'm going to add a layer mask. There's a button at the bottom of the layer panel that's a rectangle with a circle in it that is your layer masks button that will add a layer mask to this layer. And it will use the selection to mask out the parts that I don't want. So I just click that button, and automatically it adds a layer mask that gets rid of the stuff that I didn't want in this layer. So next what I need to do is add the simulated paper that is going to show through next to where the tears were. So I'm going to go and add a new layer, and I'm going to add a new fill layer, and you can use a solid color for this, but I already have a pattern that looks like paper that I want to use. So I'm going to choose a pattern, the simulated paper pattern that I already have. I'm going to go with this one. I want to be able to see the tears that I made before, so I'm going to make sure that the layer that shows my image is on the top. Next, I'm going to use the lasso tool again to start simulating a second pattern of tears. So I'm going to weave in and out as I drag with the lasso tool to make it look like part of the paper showed through as I started tearing. Okay. If you kind of weave in and out a little bit, you will get this effect. It's the kind of thing that's easier to see than it is to describe in words. Okay. Now, once I'm done with that second selection that is similar to the first, but different enough that it's going to be obvious once everything is said and done, what I want to do is eliminate all the paper that is on the outside of this selection. So I'm going to go to my pattern fill layer, and it already has a layer mask. So I want to edit that layer mask. And in order to do that, I'm going to hold down the Alt key or Option key on the Mac, and I'm going to click on that layer mask. And now it's letting me edit that layer mask directly. So I want to delete all the content that's on the outside of this selection. To do that, I'm going to go to Select, inverse my selection, and hit Delete. The Delete key will delete all of the contents that were outside of my selection, and you can tell it's done that because it's made it black. Now I can deselect. I don't need the selection anymore. So now if I go back and I click on the images on the left, what you'll see is that there is a pattern of a tear, and the paper is kind of showing through in some places. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rough up these edges just a little bit. In order to do that, I'm going to go back to editing the layer mask. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm going to click on one of the layer masks, Option key if you're on the Mac, and I'm going to use Filter, Pixelate, Crystallize. The Crystallize filter will allow me to create a rough edge along this layer mask boundary. I'm going to set the cell size to 5. I would choose anything from like 3 to 5. So cell size of 5 and say OK. And now you can see it's made this boundary look rough. I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to hit the pattern fill layer. So the other fill layer, at first it only selects the layer. So I need to click it again so that I'm editing the layer mask. Now I'm going to choose Filter, Pixelate, Crystallize again, and I'm going to use the same cell size, and it roughs up this layer. Now when I click over to, hang on a second. Now when I click over to the images and the layers, you can see I have a rough edge and the paper is showing through. I can close this tab now and say yes to saving my changes. And it will take me back to my corkboard where you can see the final effect, which is to make it look like it was torn from a newspaper or a magazine.